Well, let's take you to Ukraine now. Peter Zalmayev is director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative. He joins us live from near Kyiv. Peter, good to see you again. What's the situation like where you are, firstly?
Well, where I am is relatively safe, but when I say relative, you still have to understand that there are daily sirens, daily air alerts, simply because Vladimir Putin is still ultimately not given up on his idea of, if not controlling all of Ukraine, which has been proven quite, I think, decidedly, it's not going to be possible for him, but he's going to keep terrorizing all of Ukraine. So no city in Ukraine is immune from this terror.
And how is the morale of the Ukrainian people holding up then?
Well, I'll just go by what Vladimir Putin's apparent calculation starting this war was, that Ukrainians would just cow in submission. Ukrainians would run for the exit. The government will flee. He'll be able to assume very easy control of the country. With every atrocity he has committed, he's achieved the opposite. He's achieved undying hatred for Russians in Ukraine. He's essentially killed the last Russian, as the saying here goes. I don't think there's any significant sentiment in Ukraine that Ukrainians are, closer to surrendering or, negotiating on terms not favorable to them.
And a lot of attention currently on the situation in Mariupol. People there given a pretty stark ultimatum, but Ukraine's government remaining defiant in its stance. What developments do you think will follow there?
Well, keep in mind, a couple of weeks ago, there were already a similar initial ultimatum, and it's been over 2 weeks that this has gone on. The brave defenders of Mariupol have defied all sorts of expectations. They're still not giving up, even though they are essentially surrounded, and, maybe it's a matter of time when they will have to either die or surrender. But already they have more than fulfilled their original task. They've been distracting a sizable chunk of Russian troops so that the rest of Ukrainian forces can, fight battles, including the battle for Kyiv.
And you mentioned that attitudes in Ukraine are hardening against Russia as you see it. We heard from Ole Yustenko, the President Zelensky's economic advisor, saying that the country needs $50 billion in the next 6 months. Can Ukraine afford to go on like this? Can it afford a war of attrition?
Without that sort of infusion of cash that you mentioned, probably not. But once again, we still have not reached that point where Ukrainians are going to be, begging their government to surrender. We haven't seen that. And a lot of it has been, obviously, there's been a release in the form of 4.5 million refugees who have left Ukraine. But, overall, when we talk about the damage to Ukraine's infrastructure, we're already talking about hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, probably $500 billion. So you hear a lot about this in Ukraine, how that after Ukraine's victory, we will be talking about a special Marshall Plan for Ukraine's reconstruction. And I think there is understanding that it's going to have to happen. Part of it is going to have to come out of Russia's coffers in the form of, the sovereign wealth fund. Frozen in Western bank accounts. We're talking about $300+ billion. So Ukraine very much expects Russia to pay for its reconstruction.
And Ole Yustenko did mention the G7 playing a role in that. And just briefly, before I let you go, Peter, we last spoke a few days before this invasion began. Having witnessed almost 2 months of war now, what kind of resolution realistically do you see?
Unfortunately, I see a hot phase of this war playing out until way past May, probably into the summer, maybe even until the end of the summer. Keep in mind, the first stage here is May 9th, which is a victory day for Russia. It's a sacred day in Russia's calendar. It's a day of victory over the Nazi Germany. This is when the parade takes place in Moscow. Putin's going to have to show something to his, people, some kind of victory. But I think he'll go beyond that. And unless Ukraine is able to stop Putin right now and right here, he'll keep going until the day he dies. He will not live with the idea of an independent Ukraine.
That's the view of Peter Zalmayev, director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Thank you, Peter.